Just a little bit about us. So Advanced Instruments, see ourselves as a leading developer of scientific and analytical instruments. We're dedicated to helping you be more productive and providing you with quality instrumentation across multiple industries, but my focus personally is on clinical. So we're headquartered here in Norwood, Mass. That's just outside of Boston, Massachusetts, but we have offices in Wimborne in the United Kingdom, as well as Westbrook, Maine, up in the tippy top of New England. We were founded way back in 1955, and we identified a broader use of freezing point depression technology, primarily with nephrologists for the diagnosis and management of hyponatremia. And we introduced our osmometer and rebranded ourselves as Advanced Instruments, establishing us as a gold standard in osmolality testing with that freezing point depression technology. So we have a strong focus on the development of new technology, which is what we're going to talk about today, quality and support, which our services are included in there. And we're all about innovations. So this isn't where we're going to stop. The OsmoPRO Max is definitely the latest, the most impactful instrument that we'll release to market from an osmometer perspective. But we'll definitely continue to listen to your concerns so that we can continue to meet your needs as the clinical laboratory landscape continues to evolve. So again, global presence, we're everywhere from North America to South America, Africa, the Middle East, Europe, Asia Pacific, even way down under in Australia, serving over 90 countries. So a large global footprint and a trusted provider of this type of instrumentation for many, many years. So of course, as I alluded to before, we have our osmometers, which include the OsmoPRO Max, which we'll talk about today, but our semi-automated OsmoPRO as well, and our single sample Osmo One instrument, which some of you folks on the call may have or may be familiar with. We have our Inoximat anaerobic jar system, which is near and dear to my heart. I used it on the micro bench for many years to grow our anaerobic bugs in the lab that I was working at. And it's also a great technology. We have the GlowSight automated CSF cell counter. This helps for those of you who perform those manual cell counts on your hemocytometer. This helps automate that process, makes everything a lot easier, gives you a count for both total nucleated cells and red cells in about 5 minutes. Really cool technology if you're ever interested in learning more about that. And then we've got more legacy products like this BR2 over here that does a total and direct bilirubin measurement. Pretty niche, that one. Okay, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We don't want to look at slides. We're here to demo the OsmoPRO Max. So that said, I'm going to stop presenting these slides. And then I am going to bring myself front and center. And we're going to start talking about the OsmoPRO Max. So I think a good place to start with the OsmoPRO Max demo is to just take a look at the instrument. And at face value, give you a sense of kind of what you can see, what the different features are, the benefit that they provide you in your laboratory, and then go through the consumables, how they're used on the instrument, and when they're used on the instrument. So just to dive right into it, this is the OsmoPRO Max. We can also hit you with a couple different camera angles here if you want a closer look. So this is the instrument itself. So the first thing you'll see is that we have this nice big 20-position turntable where you're able to put up to 20 primary sample tubes. What do I mean by primary sample? That's your urine tubes, your urinalysis tubes, your gel separator tubes for serum and plasma, so your SSTs, your red top serum tubes. Pretty much most primary sample tubes that you would use in the laboratory setting are compatible with this turntable. So that makes it really easy to just be able to receive your sample, pop the top, and put it on the turntable with that label facing out. So this little dark rectangle in the back, which is where our onboard scanner lives, can go ahead and scan your sample into the queue and queue it up for testing as it works through that 20 sample carousel. Okay. So that said, we also have a scanner located right here under the upper housing of the instrument. That's going to be important for scanning things like your Clinitrol 290 control or your calibrators or your linearity materials into the inventory management system that exists as a software feature. And I'll show you more about that later. Hidden over here on the side is a USB input over here on this side of the instrument. That's for exporting results. The instrument stores up to 1,000 results and 10,000 events. and all of that result and QC data and event data is exportable manually through the side of the instrument. But that QC data is also exportable remotely to our advanced QC peer QC group website, which allows you to upload, analyze your QC data, and compare it with the performance of your peers as well. So kind of a fun feature there that makes things easier from a QC standpoint. Over here on the side, you'll see these little black covers. That is where the peristaltic tubing is housed and where the peristaltic pump is housed. This is actually the mechanism that pumps the system fluid through the instrument. So the OsmoPRO Max is unique in our line of osmometers in that it relies on flow-through technology to deliver the sample to the sample chamber where the freezing point depression measurement takes place. And then, of course, we have system fluid on board to go through and wash any of that sample out and into that waste container. So we make sure that the fluidic pathway remains clean, free of any organic material or anything left over from the previous test that could falsely influence any results. So really robust mechanism for regular cleaning and the mitigation of any risk of carryover between samples. Okay, so that's everything that I can show you here. We'll get into the user interface shortly, but I just wanted to show you what comes with your OsmoPRO Max or what is used with your OsmoPRO Max. Your primary consumable for this instrument is going to be your Max 500 kit, right? Since we're testing from sample tubes, there's really no other consumable that we need to use on a regular basis unless you're using short samples. I'll show you what you use for the short samples here in a moment if you have some low sample volumes or pediatric samples or just a tough stick. But for the Max 500 kit, what you're going to get is a bottle of system fluid, so the blue fluid that you see on the front of the instrument. You're going to get 2 of those peristaltic tubes to change in that, let's see if I can do this, in that black colored housing on the side of the instrument. It's really easy. They clip right off. You lefty-loosey the coupling right off the side of the instrument and righty-tighty everything right back on and put the housing back on and you're good to go. And then it comes with a tube of enzymatic cleaner as well, which is just a pepsin-based cleaner that goes in and ensures that that fluidic pathway is cleansed at the end of each day, but also as part of the maintenance kit. This is called the Max 500 kit because it's required every 500 tests. So there's actually a counter in the software, I'll show you that later, that each time you actually perform this 500 test maintenance will reset and it will indicate how close you are to needing to perform the Max 500 kit maintenance again. Something that you'll see with this consumable and another consumable that I'll show you is this RFID tag. So that RFID tag is compatible with, and I left my remotes, this RFID scanner that's located on the front of the instrument. So when you want to initiate your 500 test maintenance, you would simply just take the kit and you would hold this RFID symbol up to the RFID reader on the instrument, and it would actually initiate a step-by-step instructional video showing you exactly what steps to take to start your 500 test maintenance every step of the way. So it takes the guesswork out of performing things like that. You don't have to go looking through the IFU. You don't have to worry about calling tech services. You can just kind of take a look at what step you're on and proceed through that process until you reach the finish and then continue testing as normal after that. So that's the Max 500 kit. Another thing that you'll want to have for this instrument, because we recommend calibration just like most of our other osmometers around every 6 months, is the calibration kit. This is a calibration kit that's specifically packaged for the OsmoPRO Max. It comes with a 0, 300, 850, and 2000 milliosmol standard and an ampule opener, so you can crack open these ampules without worrying about the sharp glass. So another one of our consumables that has the RFID tag that you just hold right up to that scanner to initiate that process as well when the time comes for calibration. Some other things that you might want and could find valuable are the OsmoPRO Max Enzymatic Cleaner Kit. So this comes in this 5-pack, and we're actually introducing it in a 30-pack really soon as well, just to make it easier. And we do recommend with the OsmoPRO Max to use enzymatic cleaner at least once a day, preferably, you know, at the evening shift or the night shift when you don't have as high of a volume of osmolality testing in your laboratory. presumably. Maybe you have some unique circumstances that bring more samples in later in the day, but definitely recommended as well. As far as controls go, we have Clinitrol 290, which is a control that we require that you run every 24 hours at a designated time. And I'll get into how exactly you do that on the software. But this is a check of your calibration. So it's a calibration verification, a verification of instrument performance. And it also checks to see if something that we implemented in the software called a single point adjustment is needed. So if this 290 is run, and it's within plus or minus 2 milliosmoles of the 290 value established at the time of calibration, then your QC passes, everything continues as normal, and you can just test without any interruption. If it's outside of that plus or minus 2 milliosmol, but within plus or minus 6, then kind of likened to a blood gas analyzer, it will automatically perform what's called a single point adjustment. It will prompt the instrument to run another 290 test one more time just to verify that the single point adjustment rebaselined the 290 result appropriately. And then your QC will pass and you can continue testing as normal after that as well. Super rare, but just an added level of assurance to maintain the consistent, reliable performance of your instrument. Okay, that said, as many of you might know, we also have propanol and renal. So propanol is our protein control that's meant to mimic serum and plasma samples, and it comes with different values that are in the reportable range of what you would expect to see from folks' serum samples from an osmolality perspective. Same thing with urine. So we have a 300 and 800 milliosmol QC standard for those as well, and that is called renal. And then, as promised, I had mentioned what happens if you have a short sample. So just to communicate that, the primary sample tube uses 480 microliters. So that's actually what the instrument's going to take from your urine or serum tube or whatever other primary tubes you're putting on the instrument. If you have a short sample, or you have, a sample that was a tough stick or a pediatric sample, and you need to run a smaller volume, you can use an insert. And the instrument will aspirate just 190 microliters instead of that full 480 to perform the testing off of the small volume insert kit. Okay, so that's all of the consumables that you get. One other thing I want to mention that I think is pretty cool, that just makes everything that much more easier, is this adapter set. For those of you who have used a discontinued instrument of ours called the A20 in the past, it also came with adapters. In this adapter set, there's different ampule adapters, so for your protanol and renal controls that I just described, as well as your Clinitrol 290, all of your calibration standards, all of the standards from your linearity set, they have a corresponding ampule adapter, which make it really easy for the instrument to identify what you're loading into the turntable, because every one of these has an identifier telling you which ampule to put into the adapter. And then the barcode that's wrapped all the way around each of these adapters will tell the instrument what you've put in each position. And it will also make it easier because those step-by-step instructions that I was describing for calibration and for the Max 500 maintenance kit will also tell you what adapter to put in what position on the turntable when you're going through that process. So just another thing that makes everything that much more easy when you're performing things that are maybe out of what's considered routine, like a calibration or a 500 test maintenance. So just wanted to mention that as well. Okay, with that said, just quick housekeeping things. I realized I didn't mention at the beginning of the presentation. If you do have questions, please feel free to add them in the chat. I do have a colleague who's monitoring the chat who will communicate all of your questions to me at the end of the presentation. We'll probably have about 10 to 15 minutes to go over all of that as well. Sorry for missing that in the beginning. But with that, I'm going to just dive right into the software and show you some of the features that we've included based on feedback from customers like yourself who really were looking for something easier to perform a more automated osmolality testing workflow. So what does that mean, and what do we actually add to the software? So first, I'm going to start with the home screen just to kind of show you everything that's happening here, all the different indicators, and where you can expect to see certain information pop up. So taking a look at the screen all the way over to the left there, you'll see a little green teardrop looking thing with a number above it. That's that Max 500 counter I was talking to you about before. So after you have performed your 500 test maintenance, that number will reset up to 500. And then each test you run will count 1 off of that 500 number until it counts all the way back down to 0 again. That little green teardrop indicator will change to yellow and then to red as you work through the process. So that QC indicator is the next one to the right. It also has a number in the middle, which is right now an 18. That's because remember that 290 needs to be run every 24 hours at the same time of day each day. And I'll show you how to program that a little later. And once you run that QC, right now the default on this instrument is for 7 a.m. So I ran that QC at 7 a.m. It will count down each hour from 24 all the way down to when it will turn red, indicating that your Clinitrol 290 check needs to be run again. And then we have this one that says LAN. That confirms if you're connected to your LIS, if information is transmitting. If it's not, that indicator will be red, and that will also have a number in the middle that will count up to indicate the number of results that haven't crossed over. And then once you regain connectivity, there's a way to force those results over into your LIS as well. So no worries there. If you're confused on what any of these indicators mean, you can always use this little question mark, and you can open it up and see that there's a handy little key to go through for testing indicators, for general indicators, indicators related to your system fluid and your LIS, and then access levels. So I'll show you more about this later, but as you can see, the little gold key is next to the word supervisors, and that's because menu items that have just that little gold key on them are restricted only to supervisors. So if somebody who doesn't have a user profile with supervisor permissions tries to access those menus, then they will be blocked from doing so. The one with the silver and gold key is available to everybody, any user that's logged in the system. So with this system, it's kind of unique in that you have the ability to set up specific user profiles with specific user permissions, although you're not obligated to. If you'd like to just have everybody in the laboratory share one supervisor user profile, that's up to you. Or if you're very particular about who you want doing what, then you can set up individual user profiles, and that's fine too. Pretty cool feature there as well. Okay, so here you'll also see the 20 position turntable on the left. You have your units there in the middle, milliosmoles per kilogram of water. That's where your result will pop up of the current sample being tested. And then you'll have a result log on the right side where your results populate until you run out of room there. But remember, we do store up to 1,000 results at any one time. So you can go into this menu bar with the 3 lines, and you can see that top middle option in the menu. The very first one is results. So when I click on that, it will load up everything I've run. And as you can see, I've run a lot of 290. So taking a look at this, you can actually select any of these results on the list. Now let's pick something that has a little variation here and there just to show the stat feature. And then you can hit statistics. And then it will actually populate based on the results that you've chosen, a mean result, a standard deviation of the selected results, and a coefficient of variation. So some quick stats that you can populate from the result menu. You can also, as I had mentioned before, with that USB input on the side, export your results onto a USB or onto a hard drive or laptop. Makes it really easy to do that as well. And sold separately, there are also compatible printers and printer paper that you can connect to the instrument. So if you do want a paper copy, which I know that's how my lab operated, we had electronic backup, but also paper copies of everything, then you can go ahead and print all these results off as well at any time. Okay, so that was the result menu. Let's go back into the menu and take a look at a couple of these other things. So I had mentioned the maintenance kit and how easy it was and how there were step-by-step instructions to carry everything out. I'm not going to go through that whole entire process right now, but I do just want to hit calibration just to show you exactly what I mean by step-by-step instructions. And by the way, I'm keying in a password each time after selecting a username, but you will have the ability to get access to the instrument without putting your username and password in every time through a badge scan if you'd like to program that in as well. But because it's a demo instrument and I don't have a hospital badge here in Norwood with me, I'm just going to keep keying in that username and password. So this is what it looks like when you initiate your calibration protocol or your Max 500 kit maintenance protocol. The first thing that's going to pop up is a list of instructions on the right and a step-by-step, frame-by-frame instructional video on the left, showing you exactly what to do. So the first thing it's having you do when you initiate the calibration procedure is scan in your RFID reader for your calibration kit, and then you'll hit load, and all of the instructions that you need to perform that calibration will pop up on the screen, and it will actually show you a step-by-step little video frame by frame of where to load each calibration standard and which calibration ampule and in what position on the 20 sample turntable. Okay, so we don't have time to perform a calibration during the demo right now. And it certainly doesn't need to be calibrated because it was right on the money all morning. So that's wonderful. So that said, let's take a look at a couple other menu features. So we talked about the maintenance kit. There are other things that you can dig into in this menu where the diagnostic menu is, like things that you might work with your field service engineer on, or your tech services hotline with if you have questions about probe alignment or something with your LCD screen, or cleaning or any other maintenance outside of the maintenance that you perform with the Max 500 kit. There's menu options for all of those here. Going back into the menu, we also have this controls log. So I talked a little bit about that in the scanner that's located under the upper housing of the instrument, and how you can log in different controls and calibration standards in your inventory management system or your controls log here on the instrument. So you can see that right here on the top, I have this Clinitrol 290 control logged into my controls log because it's the one that I'm going to be using every day to perform my Clinitrol 290 check. Let's say I no longer want that lot to be active. What I can do is just have it selected, which I already do. Just hit this delete button. It's going to make sure that I want to do that. I'm going to say yes, because I want to show you how easy it is just to log another control into the system. So to put another one in here, you'll say add. And then it's asking me to scan the barcode or enter the ID. So let's say if you're using a third-party control, this is where you would manually input that information. But when you're using Clinitrol 290 that's provided by Advanced Instruments, you have the option to just scan in. Let's see if I can get this angle right. Oh, there we go. Scan in this UDI barcode that's on the side of the box here. So I'll do that. And then I will show you. That's not the right angle. And then I will show you what populates here. So you can see that Clinitrol 290 has been added here. There's an ID, there's a lot number, an expiration date, a nominal value, and then an expected QC range based off that nominal value based on a single standard deviation. So that's all automatically loaded into the control log. You hit save, and when that button turns gray, you know it's been logged. You can hit exit, and you can see that it will appear right there on the top of the list, just as it did before. Something else that's kind of cool you can do from this menu is you can chart a Levy-Jennings plot using this lot. So every single control that I've run under this lot, I can chart in this plot. And you can actually see within different levels of confidence based on those lines. So the red one is 3 SDs, the yellow 2, the green is 1, how your controls have performed over time. You can select a date range that you want to assess the performance of your controls within. You can also export this result as well. So pretty neat little feature on that one as well for each specific control lot. All right, let's back out of there and go back into the menu. Okay, the other thing that I want to show all of you is the settings menu. In the settings menu, you'll see very general settings. And again, there are those little gold and silver keys again. So anyone could change the date and time or the language on the instrument, but only supervisors can add or delete or edit user profiles. Only supervisors can, perform some of these other things like hardware changes or probe resistance or probe alignment or, LIS connectivity, which is going to be under your network button, and things like data management and system updates. This also includes your configuration, which I'll show you in just a moment. But first, I just want to show you how easy it is to set up users, because it is important for a lot of laboratories to designate user profiles and permissions to everybody on their staff and in their lab who will be using the instrument. So here you can see on the demo instrument here in the demo room in Norwood, we have an admin profile and a service profile. But let's say we bring somebody on board. Their name is Ted. Why not? Ted's a good name. If there's any Teds on the line, shout out to you. And then you go ahead and put a password in. And then we'll verify the password. And then down here, you can designate the access level. So operator, gold and silver key, or supervisor, just the gold key. We brought Ted on as a supervisor. He's a rising star. Okay, so it says user information saved. And when we back out, you can see Ted there. But at the last minute, Ted got an offer to be a lab director at competing laboratories. So we don't want Ted to have access to our instrument anymore. So we're going to go ahead and delete him out of there. And it's just that easy. But again, only people with a supervisor access level can change or edit different user profiles. Okay, so let's go ahead and click into this other button I was talking about, which is configuration. And these are some of what I think are the coolest features of the Osmo Pro Max. So there's this menu, which, okay, maybe I misled you. This menu isn't very cool, but some of these other menus are. These are just different things that you can indicate as general operator permissions that will actually change where those gold and silver keys show up on the different menu options. But if we go into testing, you can see that over here, you can decide if a user ID or a sample ID is required for the test. You can designate the number of replicates per sample. So that top box where it says number of replicates per sample is actually how many on your patient samples, how many replicates the instrument will automatically run. So if you're a laboratory that likes to run just one test per sample, that's totally fine. You can bring it down to 1. If you like to run 2, that's fine too. You can bring it up to 2. You can do all the way up to 5 if you really wanted to, and if you had enough sample. But another cool thing is, let's say you set it at 2 replicates per sample, you can designate an acceptable spread between those 2 results. So let's say you don't want them to be more than 2 milliosmoles apart. You can designate that here, and then you can select that box on the left to automatically retest that sample if it's outside of the spec that you sent for an acceptable range between those 2 samples. So pretty cool feature. And in that rectangle down below, same feature, except it's for your QC. So it's for your controls. So you can set a number of replicates per control that, again, your instrument will recognize based on the barcode in those ampule adapters. And it will automatically run however many replicates you set on each of the controls that you load into the turntable 2, where you can also set that spread, depending on how you want it. Okay, so we talked about the daily Clinitrol 290 check. And it being run at the same time every day. So this is where you'll actually program that feature. So every instrument, as a default, comes with a 7 a.m. Time to perform the QC. But from this menu, you can change it to whatever you want. So if you know your first shift's going to come in around 8 a.m. and perform the QC on all the chemistry analyzers in the core lab around that time, then you can program it for 8 a.m. And they can tackle it whenever they get to it. But just know that the instrument will prevent you from performing any patient testing until this daily Clinitrol 290 check has been performed. Let's say you're somewhere within that 24-hour time frame and you feel like there's a need to force that check and you want to run that Clinitrol 290 check against your baseline earlier than you typically would at that 24-hour time frame. You can go into this menu and just hit the Force QC Test button. and it will do just that. It will run your 290 and check it against that baseline you established at the time of calibration. So for regular QC operations, most laboratories have a range that's acceptable to them, that their QC result can be outside of the C of A for that lot. So that's what this menu is for. So you get to choose an action that you want the instrument to take if you're outside of the specified range. So let's say you set this to 2 SDs, which is about, plus or minus 4 milliosmoles per kilogram of water. And you could have it issue a warning if you're outside of that range, or you could just altogether have the instrument stop running until you're able to successfully bring your QC into spec. So just some things that you can do from that menu. And then this menu just has some basic options around automatically logging different users out, dimming the screen just to save energy, and then a calibration reminder, right? So for our osmometers here at Advanced Instruments, we typically recommend calibrating every 6 months or as needed, right? If your result is outside of your acceptable QC range and you feel it's time to calibrate, then you would calibrate. But you could also designate a reminder at the 6-month and 12-month mark using this instrument as well. So a nice little message will pop up letting you know. And then this is the badge scan functionality I was talking about. So you can select that. And then when you build your user profiles, you can program a badge to be associated with your user profile. So each time you scan in, you can scan your badge and it will recognize you as the user associated with that barcode. We're not going to save any of these changes in this menu. But okay, I think that concludes all of the really neat software features I wanted to show you. So I think with that said, we're just going to change the angle here. And we're going to run a sample just so you can see how the instrument functions. So again, almost any primary sample tube is compatible with this turntable. I just have this small little glass tube that you would, buy in bulk to pour samples off of, maybe urine tubes or urine cups into to run on your chemistry analyzers. And I slapped a label there on the outside. So this is kind of a short tube. But this turntable accommodates, your big SST tubes or your red top serum tubes, tall tubes, short tubes. And the way that it does that is because it has a liquid level sensing mechanism. So the probe will actually come down out of the housing in the top part of the instrument, and it will look for that liquid, and it won't stop until it finds it. And when it does, it will reach a depth, knowing that it's going to pull about 480 microliters off the sample, and then go ahead and aspirate your sample. So the most important thing about loading these samples is just making sure that barcode is facing out. As long as your barcode is facing out, then the scanner in this little black rectangle in the back will be able to scan it when it passes on through, and you'll be up and running and ready to go. So let me go back to the software screen just so you can see what the play button looks like. So yeah, once you've loaded your sample, you just hit this play button. That's exactly what it looks like. And then you can see the turntable will home itself on position 20, and then it will count down from position 20. Doesn't matter where you put your sample tubes. It will go looking for it. It'll check every position and scan each one where it finds a barcode and a patient identifier. And then going back to the software, you can actually see where it's scanned in the tube that I had loaded up in position 13. Again, it doesn't really matter where you put it. And there's a 13-1 and a 13-2. And that's because, remember, I had it pre-programmed to run each test in duplicate. So that 13-1 will be the first result. That 13-2 will be the second result. And the ID, which will likely be the accession number that you use as a patient identifier in your hospital, will be located over to the right side with the result in the middle. Okay, so the first thing that it's going to do is it's going to pull up some system fluid. It's going to clean out that fluidic pathway, make sure it's clean and primed and ready to go to pull up our sample into that sample chamber and start that freezing point depression measurement. Switch up the angle one more time. You can see that little metal pole in the back coming down and actually aspirating sample out. That's your probe. So it's going to come down and bring up 480 microliters of sample. take it up into the sample chamber and freeze it and take a measurement. Okay, so pop back to the software here. You can see the little progress bar up there. It says it's pipetting. It's taking the sample up, and then it will say testing once it proceeds to the testing phase of the entire test duration, which takes about 4.5 to 5 minutes. But you'll be loading multiple tubes on this instrument all at once and be able to walk away, and that LIS will communicate everything over into the system that needs to be communicated once the test completes, left there for you to verify, depending on how you have your LIS set up. So really easy testing procedure. Just load and go, really, and just walk away and do whatever else you have to do. Maybe some of those manual cell counts, or anything else that you might be juggling in the laboratory. So another feature I wanted to show you is, we'll make pretend here. Let's say you've got a patient that comes into the emergency department. Your emergency doc thinks maybe this guy or gal either purposefully or accidentally consumed ethylene glycol, so antifreeze. So what your provider will rely on is the difference between the measured osmolality result, so the result that you're going to get off of your OsmoPRO Max or Osmo 1 or OsmoPRO. And they're going to take that and subtract a calculation that they make off of a few different analytes on your chemistry analyzer, so sodium, glucose, and blood urea and nitrogen. And the difference between those is going to indicate to them whether or not it's likely that the patient ingested this toxic alcohol, ethylene glycol, and whether or not they're at risk for permanent organ failure or even potentially death if it goes untreated. So if that gap, that osmolar gap between the measured result that you'll get off your advanced instruments osmometer and the calculator result that you'll get off your chemistry analyzer is greater than 10 milliosmoles, then the provider has evidence to support his suspicion that his patient, his or her patient, has ingested a toxic alcohol. Why that's important, again, if we don't get to that patient right away, give them a drug to help them digest that ethylene glycol in their bloodstream, and also get them on dialysis right away just to help clear all of that out of there to prevent any organ damage or further organ damage or potentially organ failure and death. We need to act right away. So getting that result out is really important. So another cool feature is, let's say when you get that patient sample of that patient who potentially ingested that toxic alcohol, let's say you have samples on here that you just loaded up in positions 1 through 10, and you're only on test number 3. You have this really cool button here, which is a stopwatch with a little lightning bolt, so it actually looks pretty cool too. You can go ahead and click that. It'll make a little beeping noise, and up here it says select positions. So what I would do is that I would pick a spot that I want to load my stat test. So if I'm in positions 1 through 10, maybe I'll throw it in position 11. And then I can scan in that tube, put it in position 11, and then hit start. And then after it finishes sampling, whatever sample that it's on, after it finishes aspirating that sample and completes that testing, it will actually move over to position 11, where I loaded my stat test, and ignore everything from 4 to 10 that is programmed as a routine test to prioritize that stat sample in the queue. So another really great feature that helps us make sure we're turning the results around for the patients that need it fastest, where their potential treatment for a toxic alcohol ingestion is on the line. So that's another really great feature of this instrument as well. Okay, so I completed the first test. We're right on the money. All I did was take some of that 290 and put it into that sample tube. So we're right on the money with the results, so that's wonderful. You can see over here that in position 13-1, we have our 290 result. And because I programmed it to run everything in duplicate, it automatically just goes right into cleaning. Once it's finished cleaning, it's just going to go right back into that tube, take up another 480 microliters, retest, report that result, and then move on to the next sample in the queue, if I had more than one sample. In this case, I don't.